I'd like to call the meeting to order of the Planning Commission of December 11th. And we'd like to ask City Attorney Munoz if he could lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Madam Secretary, can you please call the roll?
Please let the record show that all planning commissioners are present.
Thank you. Next item, approval of the minutes.
Move that we approve the minutes.
Second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can we have a vote? That passes 5-0. Next item is public comments. Does anyone here have any public comments for anything not on the agenda? Okay, we'll skip that. Consent calendar. There are no items on the consent calendar. Section D, item 2. Intended use permit AUP 17-0001 and conditional use permit CUP 1717 to allow the installation of a roof-mounted commercial wireless antenna facility on an existing building at 34163 PCH. Do we have a staff report?
Yes, Associate Planner Danny Giamatti will give the staff report.
Good evening, Chairman McCann, fellow commissioners. Tonight's topic covers the installation of a roof-mounted wireless antenna facility located within on a building within the city's town center plan area. Okay, so the subject site is located at 34163 PCH. It's between Violet Lantern and Golden Lantern within the town center mixed-use district. The site's developed with an existing 2-level commercial building. It's currently occupied by the Dana Point Chamber of Commerce as well as multiple other tenants. The antenna facility is intended to relocate and replace an existing wireless antenna facility located at the Union Bank building, shown on the image here in orange. Last March, the Planning Commission approved entitlements for the subject antenna facility to be located at another site within the town center. However, the site owner decided not to move forward with the rental agreement. So the subject building here is a design that's suggestive of a Cape Cod architecture. It includes a sloped gable roof. There's 2 dormers on the front, and it's got a brown asphalt shingle roof, multi-pane windows, a cream white colored trim, and a sand tone horizontal clapboard siding. There's also a flat area that's screened behind the sloping rear roof line, which accommodates existing mechanical equipment. And that's shown in that bottom image on the right there. You can see it just barely. So the Dana Point Wireless Antenna Ordinance requires approval of a major antenna use permit for antenna facilities that are set back from 0 to 150 feet from the center line of a scenic highway, and also a minor antenna use permit for installation set back over 150 feet from any residential property lines and classrooms. Additionally, within the Dana Point Town Center plan, there's a requirement for the approval of a conditional use permit for all commercial antennas. So the proposed installation falls under those categories, as it's located 70 feet from the center line of Pacific Coast Highway, which is a scenic highway, and then 300 feet from the nearest residential district. And that's actually located on San Marino Place, up behind La Plaza Pacific, where the Hennessy's is. Actually, is a good locator. Okay. So the project here includes the installation of 6 panel antennas to be housed inside a fiber reinforced plastic faux lighthouse screen structure, which extends 9 feet 3 inches above the height of the existing parapet. And there's also some auxiliary equipment that's going to be mounted on the existing flat roof area, which I talked about in the previous slide. The overall proposed height is 40 feet, which is the maximum building height allowed within the Dana Point Town Center plan area. The lighthouse design incorporates a sand tone paint and brown asphalt shingle roofing to match the existing building's finished colors and materials. The antenna screen utilizes elements that are also suggestive of the Cape Cod architecture of the lighthouses that you see on the East Coast. These elements include large rectangular windows, which form simulated glass enclosure, a lantern room with an exterior cylindrical gallery, guardrail, and a roof cap. So the two proposed equipment cabinets that are going to be mounted alongside the faux lighthouse are going to be on that flat portion of roof on the building, and they're going to be screened wholly from view with a short parapet extension on the right-hand side, as shown in this image here. Staff concluded that given the Cape Cod architectural styling and the antenna signal strength maps, the proposed faux lighthouse design and parapet extension both fulfill the stealth design criteria that's established within our antenna use ordinance of our code. A radio frequency report has been submitted by the project applicant, verifying that all proposed facility will comply with the FCC, the Federal Communication Commission, standards for public radio frequency exposure. In addition, the submitted coverage maps verify that the placement of the new antennas will not only provide adequate replacement, but also an improvement to Sprint's cellular service for both public and private users within that town center plan area. And as you can see, on the maps here, it shows with and without individual coverage, and then on the bottom here. So with that, based on the subject analysis, staff has determined that the project is consistent with the policies and provisions of the City of Dana Point General Plan, the Dana Point Town Center Plan, and the Dana Point Zoning Code, and also the findings articulated in the draft resolution can be made. Therefore, staff recommends approval for the subject entitlements subject to the conditions contained in the attached resolution. That's my presentation, and if the applicant and myself are here to answer any additional questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any of my fellow commissioners have any questions of staff? Commissioner Nelson?
Yeah, a couple quick questions for you, Danny. You answered my question about major versus minor, so there is a difference. This
Correct.
is a major, okay.
Yeah.
The only other question is, you talked about in your presentation, this is a replacement for the approval that was done earlier this year. Does that still hold, and do we have the potential to have two towers in that neighborhood, or?
Well, the entitlement technically was approved, and I know that there's a two-year period, obviously, for
So 2
expiration.
years, if they don't perfect that by building it, it goes away.
I believe so. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that entitlement still stands.
Correct, yes, that entitlement still stands, but the property owner was not willing to enter into the lease agreement, so it seems that the property owner is not interested in pursuing that, but yes, they could, although I don't know how that would affect the radio coverage, and I think the applicant could best speak to maybe that issue.
Well, yeah, my question would be, would another provider be able to come in and take on and, basically pick that up if they wanted to?
If the design was not changed, we may be able to issue a substantial conformance or compliance for that project, I believe.
Great, that was it. Thank you.
Commissioner Donor?
Danny, on A3, it says there's a non-exclusive walk path to the equipment room. And on on the Waterford Compliance Report, page 13, it says it's required to have controlled access to limit exposure at close range. So my question is, if it's non-exclusive, but it needs to be controlled, which is it?
That is a good question. The applicant, I don't know if she's available to possibly answer that question. Yes, okay. Mari, would you like to step forward? Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mari Hager. I'm here on behalf of Verizon Wireless. I work for Core Development Services. I'm their authorized vendor for this project. And as I believe most of you would recall, I was here last March to seek approval of a new facility at the building at it's 24661 Del Prado as a result of the impending decommissioning of Sprint's existing facility at the Union Bank. And at the time, we were in depth in negotiations with that property owner. We felt comfortable proceeding with the zoning process, and we're actually planning on submitting for plan check. But due to, there was a significant opposition, if you'll recall, from the neighborhood about concerns over radio frequency emissions. And there was also concerns from his tenants that I don't think that he had recognized prior to the project coming before the commission. And so after that fact, he decided not to proceed with the lease. So the lease was never fully executed. And so to answer your question regarding that aspect of will that site get built, that would be no on behalf of Sprint, because that property owner is absolutely not willing to move forward. We tried extensively, obviously, to get him back on board because so much time, effort, and energy and money had gone into pursuing that option. So that definitely isn't going to be an option for Sprint. And if this is approved, that project can't be built due to interference issues. It would basically cancel out it would cancel the signal propagation in certain sectors. So it would really, there'd be no point in spending the money to build a facility that close in proximity to one another. I don't know if the city could transfer that to another carrier and if that would require another entitlement, but on Sprint's part, they have no intention of building the project there. After we did lose that project, we went back to the drawing board, and fortunately, we did find this willing landlord. We exhausted the search ring again, and as I believe I told you prior to this, it's very limited. It's a two square block area, and due to a number of factors, including buildings with insufficient height, there's quite a few that are just one story, or properties being vacant or undeveloped, or unwilling landlords, or the fact that staff indicated to Sprint that they would not be supportive of the installation of a new tower in the town center specific plan area. We were able to at least lock this in, and we have a very willing landlord, and we're finalizing lease negotiations now. And we do believe that this is a very good design for the area. It does fit in with the architecture of the building. It will be fully stealth. The antennas and all related appurtenances inside the antenna structure will not be visible. The equipment on the rooftop will not be visible. And in fact, it almost improves the visibility to the existing mechanical equipment on the rooftop now. The parapets are pretty low, and if you're driving, I guess it'd be east down Pacific Coast Highway, you can see some of the rooftop mechanical equipment. So by raising the parapet a few feet, we'll also be concealing all the existing equipment. I'm sorry, I don't remember the other question that you had. Oh, about the non-exclusive access. That is something we denote on the plans, really more for the purposes of the lease, so that the landlord understands that we have rights to be able to access the property to get onto the roof when needed, when techs need to go out to check on the equipment or do maintenance or do any sort of work on the facility. But it doesn't have anything to do with relation to the radio frequency emissions report or anything that has to do with that aspect. The FCC does regulate occupational limits for RF emissions thresholds, and so what they require is signage on the facility on the rooftop, and that's just warning signage for anyone who is on the rooftop to notify them that they are in the close proximity of a wireless communications facility. But the report that was done by the independent vendor did determine that the site is in full compliance with both general population and occupational thresholds. They didn't even propose any mitigation measures. This site actually happened to have a better report than the last one on Del Prado, where I think there was some questions about exposure seeping on to adjacent properties. And this is actually operating at 1%. So when it's at 1%, it's negligible. So there aren't even mitigation measures proposed, other than the standard signage. I hope that answers your question.
Understand.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner Opal?
On this, Danny, is the applicant a combination of Sprint and the building owner, or only Sprint? Just because the resolution really doesn't talk about them having permission to do this to the building. Anything, any easements or any requirements as conditions?
Well, per the resolution, I believe the applicant is the owner. That's something that's a way that we dictate that in the resolution. However, for the project itself, the applicant is Core Services, which is processing the application on behalf of Sprint. As far as rights to operate it and use it, I think Mari kind of explained that as far as the non-exclusive access went. But this will be turned over, I believe, to Sprint once Core Services processes the application, and then the necessary contractors go out and install the system.
If I may, the applicant is the property owner, and the rights or the entitlements go with the property. So, like similar to the other question, if that other property owner changed their mind and wanted to pursue negotiations with another carrier, they would be able to do that. They do have that entitlement. It's not specific to Sprint. So that was one of the questions you had. I think it's unlikely, and but I did want to answer that.
Any other questions? Do we have confidence that Verizon is going to move forward with this location? Because we don't want to be approving towers all over. Well, she said Verizon.
I say Verizon, sorry.
She said Verizon. Okay, Sprint, that this will in fact go forward?
Well, I can tell you that there were multiple design iterations, obviously with the past approval. As Mari has noted, it was a big letdown, I think, that the lease agreement didn't go through. I know they've been working feverishly the last 6-7 months to try to get this new application in. It sounds like, based on the application and their willingness to continue this and pursue this, and the agreement that's being signed, that this is most likely is going to go forward. However, from our perspective, if an application is submitted for an antenna use permit and we can make the correct findings, then we technically we would approve. Obviously, other locations within the city where we're seeing where they can be where the findings can be made.
Although
To add to that, Sprint's extremely confident that this is going to proceed, and they don't really have a backup option at this point. The property owner of the Union Bank building has already contacted Sprint and demanded a decommission date. So now, really, literally, the clock is running. We've had all year to try to line up a property and get it in place and get the permits in place, but we are really now running against the clock. If this is approved tonight, we can now get into plan check, which takes a few months to get building permits and get it constructed. But Sprint's really up, against the gun, really, to get that site decommission, get this on air, or they will have an absolute lack of coverage in this very critical area of the city.
So I don't doubt Sprint's desire to have it done, but what about do they have it like locked up contractually with the property owner, so the property owner can't back out, which is what happened last time?
The lease has actually been fully negotiated, and it's with Sprint's legal now for approval and execution.
So if I may, I think if that's a concern of the commission and conferring with the city attorney, you could condition the approval to be contingent on the execution of that lease agreement, and we could word it so that it doesn't have to come back to the commission. It's just that your approval is contingent on an executed lease agreement.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions. Anybody else? Okay, so this is a public hearing, so my perception is we need to open the public hearing. Madam Secretary, do we have any speaker slips? Okay. Do you have any other comments to add?
No, I think I've pretty much summed it up. I'd be glad to answer any further questions. I do want to just ask one question. If that condition is placed upon the project that it is contingent upon the lease being fully executed, is it still possible to submit into plan check to get that process rolling in the meantime if it's not done in the next few weeks?
Right. You could submit at risk. There's a waiver that we would make you fill out, just
Okay.
where you're saying that we're pursuing through the plan check process at our risk. But
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. With that, I'll close the public hearing. Do we have any discussion regarding the project? Hearing none, I'll venture some thoughts. Is this thing on, by the way?
So I think what happened at the council meeting is that they are on for purposes of recording for the minutes, for the recording, but they're not, the speakers are not working.
Okay. So I've reviewed the project. I think it looks good and is compliant with the zoning code and meets I agree with the findings in the staff report. I like it aesthetically. It looks like an enhancement to me aesthetically. I am in favor of adding a condition such that final approval for a permit can't be released until there's a signed lease agreement, but that they could go in at risk into plan check. So that's what I would recommend. Anyone else want to comment?
Yeah, I do, Mr. Chair. So a couple things. First, I think, well, in reviewing the project, you know, this thing obviously does not block any views or have any meaningful impact on the public views from the right-of-way. You know, the Union Bank building approval, and if we don't figure out as a city or the applicant doesn't find a place for their antenna to go, it could slow down kind of the redevelopment of the downtown area. And I would think that we would want to move this forward to ensure that other projects that are hinging on this occur. I think it looks great. It certainly is integrated well into not only the building itself, but the environment. And I would be in full support. I do, you know, the idea of getting into somebody else's personal business with leases and stuff, I think that's stepping outside of the realm of what this body's for. I would not want to be participating in that. If the business wants to spend money and build something on a building they don't have rights to, that's a legal matter that we shouldn't, in my opinion, be getting involved in. The property owner and Sprinter are all big company. They're big boys. They know what they're doing, and we should let them handle their business matters, and we deal with planning. That's just my own personal opinion. So I wouldn't be in support of that specific condition, but I am in support of the project and ready to make a motion.
Yeah, the only comment that I would make is we have an approval that's outstanding now, even though Sprint has no intention of proceeding with that. So if we approve this one and it doesn't go through, we have 2 approvals outstanding and nothing operational. So I don't see anything wrong with conditioning our approval on a final executed lease. Then we won't have a second property approved without a tenant.
Any other comments or motions to make? Well, hearing none, I'll make a motion. From a discussion perspective, so I just don't want to see a bunch of approvals around town that could get built later, you know.
Well, they got 2 years to perfect the approvals.
Right, and the other one was approved in March.
Yep.
I'll move to approve antenna use permit AUP 17-1 and CUP 17-17 to allow installation of roof-mounted commercial wireless telecommunication antenna facility on an existing building located at 34163 PCH as recommended in the staff report without any extra add-ons.
I would second that.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. That passes 5-0. Congratulations. There's no old business. There's no new business. Staff reports.
I have no staff reports this evening. Just this is our last meeting of the year, and enjoy your holidays. And thank you for the service that you provided to the community this year. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Commissioner comments?
I'll just say congratulations to Zephyr on their grand opening of South Cove. Looks great.
see that.
Commissioner Opal?
Just want to say we went to the Christmas at La Plaza last weekend, gosh, but we missed the snow this year. The first year without snow, but we took our requisite pictures with Santa and built our Lego house, so had a great time with that. Thank you.
I just want to thank staff for everything they continue to do tirelessly and unappreciated or underappreciated, unrecognized, that's for sure. So thank you for all you do so professionally. And you know, town looks great right now with all the lights and stuff around. So it's great to get in the holiday spirit that way. And also a special welcome to City Attorney Munoz. Nice to see you. You're always welcome. That's it for me.
Well, I would echo that, but also I would say that we are very, very fortunate to have the staff we have here and be here in Dana Point, because I talked to other individuals in Southern California that are proposing to run for not only Planning Commission, but for city councils, and the stories that you hear are pretty depressing in terms of how other candidates are being treated. So, and we just don't see this here, and we're very, very lucky, and I think that is because of staff and the way that that garden has grown. So thank you very much, and I hope everybody has a very wonderful rest of December.
Yeah, I'll echo that. I feel truly blessed to sit on this commission with my fellow commissioners and to work with such a great staff, and wish all you guys a happy holidays and a happy new year. Can't wait to get back to business the first of the year. So.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. So with that, we'll have a holiday adjournment.